In this video, we show you how to implement the multi-company reporting abilities in QuickBooks, including setup, configuration of manual free data syncs, and of course using the results. QuickBooks makes it easy to report on multiple QuickBooks files because you can combine any data, not just financial reporting, all while never having to open individual QuickBooks files to update your data set. In this profit and loss flexible period data model for Power Pivot, you can see that you can filter by one or more companies. We'll put these two, or you can simply just take that company and put the values underneath each one so you have information about either one of the companies. This is an accounts receivable data model for regular Excel pivot tables, and you have the same option here to where you can choose one or multiple QuickBooks files for your reporting. Here's a sales data model for Power BI, and you can see that we have the same type of options. You can even choose multiple companies here. This is true for every data model in every application that we provide. So there's over 200 examples. Every one of them you can aggregate the data for multiple QuickBooks files. We are assuming that you have properly installed QuickBooks according to our guidelines and that you are now ready to run the QuickBooks configuration tool the very first time and then add your QuickBooks files. Let's summarize the steps that you will need to take. First, your QuickBooks Database Manager must be updated to the latest version and properly monitoring the directories where the QuickBooks files reside. Then we have several things to do in each company file. First will be to check some preference settings and then creating the necessary connection users to authorize the proper data to sync. You will then rebuild the QuickBooks file and realize that even if a verify shows no errors, the Intuit software development kit sees things that the verify would not. You will run the QuickBooks configuration tool for the first time, which will invoke the wizard and walk you through the process of adding that first QuickBooks file. Once the wizard is complete, then you can add additional QuickBooks files. And of course, the final step will be to set up and or kick off the sync process. So let's go through some of the steps that you're going to encounter. The first one is locating the QuickBooks Database Server Manager in your list of apps on your computer. And this brings up the utility that monitors all of the QuickBooks files and ensure that they have the proper permissions in order to be able to talk with any third-party application. You should have at least one folder here that lists your QuickBooks files. And the smart thing to do is click on the Start Scan. And what this does is notate any possible problems that might exist, and it corrects them. And thus you eliminate any potential communication problems between QuickBooks and a QuickBooks file. In this case, it's noted several issues and it is resolving those. And now it has let us know that everything is successful. So this is the first step. So now we have several things to do with each company file. Make sure that you log in as administrator and in single user mode for this purpose. First, we're going to go to the Preferences and go to Integrated Applications, the Company Preferences tab, and make sure that this is unchecked. If you check that, then no third-party application can communicate with QuickBooks. The second preference we need to check is this one under Accounts, called Show Lowest Sub-Account Only. The Intuit Software Development Kit has a bug that's been there for 24 years. It will never get resolved. And it prevents us from having this checked and have accurate financial statements. There are two exceptions to this rule. If you don't have the same name at a different level, which QuickBooks allows you to do, or if you have account numbers, then this is not an issue and you can leave this checked. But for the most part, if you uncheck this, you won't have any problem with any of the financial statements that we provide out of the box. The third item on our checklist has to do with creating the necessary connection users to authorize QuickBooks to talk to QuickBooks. Let's go to Company, Users, Set up Users and Roles. We already set up the user called QuickBooks, and we have two roles assigned to it. That's Accountant and Full Access. And the reason that both of those are needed, again, is a shortcoming in the Intuit Software Development Kit. It's been there for 24 years. It will never get resolved. We do caution you, however, to make sure that you use the default assignments for each role. If you go in and change these on your own, you could cause problems with how QuickBooks communicates with Cube. There may be certain data that does not come across, and all of a sudden your reports are not accurate. So make sure you use a different role for other things that you would like to assign for others in your company. The second set of permissions is for enterprise only. So let's go to File, let's go to Utilities. We have something called Custom Reporting. We're going to click on Manage ODBC Users and create this specific user. We'll call this Cube. We're going to put in a password of Cube 369, and then we make sure that we bring all of these groups over. You can't bring just the report admin or the accounting. You must bring all of them in. That user that you just created will pop up when you request permissions for Cube to talk to QuickBooks. Some of you will have to deal with the special QuickBooks user. Intuit requires this user when you have employee and company social security numbers involved, or company bank details, accounts with bank or credit card numbers, customers with credit card numbers, or vendors with tax ID. This account normally requires you to log in every 90 days, but with the Software Development Kit, at least that's one thing we won't have to do. But you're going to have to follow some very stringent methods. First, you cannot use the same Intuit special account you used for your admin account or other accounts. It must have its own unique email. And you can only use a special Intuit account for this QuickBooks file. If you have multiple QuickBooks files, then every file will have a unique special Intuit account. I understand this is painful, but this is the only way that this works properly. The great thing about this is that you will not need to log in every 90 days to change the password on this special account, since it is only used to automatically log in to QuickBooks. The fourth step was to rebuild your QuickBooks file, and that's under File and Utilities, Rebuild Data. Now you are ready to add the first company to Cube. The Cube installation will place an icon on your desktop, and you will double click on that to open up the Cube configuration tool for the first time. This first time opening invokes the wizard, which will take you through the steps you need to configure Cube and to add your first company file. This first window warns you to read the requirements and implementation guides if you haven't already done so. The Intuit Software Development Kit has some rather strict requirements in order to allow third-party applications like Cube to connect, so the guides are required reading. The next step is connecting to QuickBooks using the users that you created previously. Make sure that you have QuickBooks open to the file you want to add, logged in as admin, and in multi-user mode. This will be the only time you need to log in as admin to perform any Cube configuration step. Pressing the Connect to QuickBooks button will trigger QuickBooks to pop up several windows which you need to answer to make the proper connection between Cube and QuickBooks. So first we're going to answer yes always. You're going to answer yes again, and then you're going to log in as the Cube user that you created originally, and then continue. Done. That is the first user that you created. Now it's going to ask you for the password for the custom reporting user we created. And if you remember, that was Cube 369. And then we go to the next step. This screen is a general guideline for the types of data models that you need. It is also a reminder that you would never load all of the data models, as one does not depend upon another. Only load what you need. The reason for this is technical in nature. If we had a direct connection to the database, we would just load everything. But because of the slow nature of the Intuit Software Development Kit and the data extraction process, it is best to just load what you plan to use. You can always go directly into the Cube configuration tool and change or add data models from the list of 35 that we have to offer. We will accept the default for this video and move to the next screen. Use this screen to set your fiscal year and the 3-year summary for your monthly period financial statements. We have specific financial statement models for Power Pivot and Power BI, which have no yearly limitation, but you can also add those at a later time. With regard to the 50 through 53 tax year, unless you are filing your taxes to the IRS using this method, it is best to leave this alone, unless you are using the 13/4 period for a custom purpose. The next screen has two options. The first is for extracting data from a particular starting date, which really helps some of the large files with several decades of data in it. One disclaimer, you can't use this if you are using QuickBooks Advanced Inventory with sites, because Intuit doesn't give us a way to get that starting information. The second option on this page is whether you want to do a schedule sync or a manual sync. For now, we will set this to a manual sync. The last section just asks us if we want to load the data immediately or later. Since we want to add other QuickBooks Company files, we're going to say, let's manually load the data at a later time. Now you're ready to finish this process, and Cube will do some internal calculations, and then it will return you to the main Cube configuration screen. Now that we have returned to this screen, if we go look at the data sources, we'll see we just have the one QuickBooks file listed. And if you go to the data model selections, you can see this allows you to choose other data models you may have not selected using the wizard. So the next step now, we need to add an additional QuickBooks file. We're going to assume in this next step that you have already created the necessary connection users and checked the appropriate preferences for all of your other QuickBooks files that you want to add to Cube, as we showed you earlier in this video. To add a second company, we will not use the wizard. We will do this from the Cube configuration tool directly. First, log in to the next company you want to add and log in as admin and in multi-user mode. Click the Add button to invoke the QuickBooks pop-up screens. I'm going to say yes and yes, continue, and then done. And now we get the custom reporting user password. You save, and that's it. Here is some basic information about the sync process and what you should expect. Sync issues stem from three areas: improper implementation, interference from a machine backup or other QuickBooks third-party application, QuickBooks data corruption. This can happen regardless of size or even number of years of data. 95% of all sync issues are the result of improper implementation. This is a more frequent occurrence in a server implementation where the dedicated server user is not created and used, per our step-by-step guides. Nothing has changed in 23 years. It is all routine and no surprises. The Intuit SDK is slow, kludgy, and has many holes, but it is secure and dependable. The sync process can be handled in two different methods. First, you can use a scheduler, which has options, and then you can do a manual on-demand sync that also has options. So let's look at several of these sync options. Under the QuickBooks Company list, we have options for individual QuickBooks files, and they can be toggled to say yes or no. The skip on schedule is helpful if you have a QuickBooks file that you no longer use but has historical data in it. The clear on sync means it's going to completely wipe out the data for that file and completely reload it from scratch. This is helpful if you have a lot of merges of accounts or items or customers on a daily basis, because those require a complete load from scratch. If we go to the manual refresh option, we'll see we also have some options for skipping unchanged QuickBooks files and for clearing all the data every time that you sync. So once you have added all of your QuickBooks files, you can either choose this manual refresh option, or wait until the scheduled time that you set up for the synchronization. There is one thing to remember above all else. QuickBooks must be open to no company file as shown here. This eliminates issues with modal windows, warnings, and of course the Intuit SDK doesn't allow us to close a file that is already open. We can only close a file that we open. This concludes our video of how to implement the multi-company reporting abilities in QuickBooks.